Welcome to the Academy of Self-Knowledge introductory webinar. You can see from this slide that our tagline is the subject is you. So let's talk about you for a minute. Know thyself is an inscription on the oracle of Apollo of Delphi in Greece in the 6th century BC. What's interesting is that it would seem obvious for a person that they would know themselves because, if I don't know myself, who would know me? But we actually have to study ourselves. So when's the last time you took a class or a course on yourself? So that's what we want to talk about today, you. There's a lot of information out there. And so because of all of this information, people tend to say knowledge is power. But at the Academy, we don't say knowledge is power, we say applied knowledge is power. Because you may notice that you'll read a book, what people call shelf help, because the books stay up on the shelf, and you'll get the information, but knowing information and actually being able to apply it are two different things. Or knowing the information and not being able to be the person that's going to apply it are two different things. So we say that information without transformation is impotent. So obviously transformation is the key. And so let's talk about transformational education for a minute. Transformational education is the kind of coursework that after you take the course, you are not the same person that began the course. My background is school teaching, and I taught junior high school Spanish for a lot of years in the California public school system. And when those kids came into my class, they left pretty much the same as when they came in. The only difference is that Johnny was a more Spanish-speaking Johnny than before he arrived. But literally as a person, he had not transformed at all. He just had more information. So information really isn't the key. It's all about transformation. So when people are talking about the importance of knowledge, let's talk about the importance of imagination. Because imagination, according to Einstein, is actually more important than knowledge. So when's the last time you took a class on how to access your imagination and how to utilize it to manifest your desires or manifest changes? I want to give you an example through a visualization exercise of how the imagination works and to clear up what imagination actually means, because your imagination is a faculty for creation, for better or for worse. So if somebody has a fear of flying, it's because they have a picture in their mind of the plane crashing. So literally that picture scares them. So what I want to put forth in this particular webinar is that your thoughts are creating pictures that, depending on what thought you're having, is going to create an emotion right behind it. If you have a thought of seeing $1 million in a briefcase that you're holding, then you're having feelings of success. If in this example that we were talking about, somebody was holding a picture of a plane crash in their mind, well, they're going to have a phobia of flying. So we definitely need to know what pictures we have in our subconscious mind, and if they're not the right ones, if those pictures wouldn't move us toward success, well then you have to know how to get in the subconscious mind, take that picture out, and replace it with the picture that would move you toward your goal. For example, do you think it would make a difference to your success if your picture of success is a homeless person pushing a shopping cart versus a person in a business suit with a briefcase full of money? Yes, it would. And I'm going to give you a practical experiential demonstration of the pictures in your head and how they really have an impact on reality. Some people think imaginary means that it's not real. But imaginary is what I call invisible reality. It's real, you just can't see it. But depending on what pictures you're holding in your imaginary an invisible reality, that's going to show up in your environment pretty soon. So let me give you this demonstration. Just go ahead and take a breath and let your eyes close. And I'm going to ask you to just kind of relax. Relax in your chair with your eyes closed. Take another breath. Let your focus go inside. And then if you would, imagine a lemon in your mind's eye. And you can find that lemon maybe in your refrigerator. Maybe it's in a fruit bowl by your sink. Just take that lemon, and you're going to need a cutting board. So get a cutting board. See what kind of cutting board you're conjuring up in your imagination. Maybe it's a wooden one. Maybe it's a white plastic. And now you'll need a knife. So go ahead and get your knife. Maybe you're going to go to the drawer, find that knife, and see what kind of a knife you're selecting. Is it a big butcher knife? Is it a little paring knife? And take that knife and cut the lemon in half. As you cut the lemon in half, notice that the juice kind of squeezes out, might get on your fingers a little bit. And then cut it again. This time cut a wedge, the kind of wedge that you would put in a glass of iced tea. And take that wedge and pick it up and put it in your mouth and bite into it. So it's kind of in your front teeth. Like if you smiled, you would have a lemon smile. So bite on it, and notice when you bite, it's pretty juicy, and the juice is going in your mouth. You feel it on your cheeks, and swallow it. And as you're swallowing it, you can feel it's bitter. And notice what happens to your face as a result of your biting in this bitter lemon. See if there's saliva, or you're scrunching up your face. Just see what happens when you bite into that lemon. And then open your eyes and come back. So what happened? I wish that we were, interactive here so that people could share their experiences. But when I have done this live, in a group of people, they'll raise their hands and say, wow, all of a sudden I started salivating. Somebody else will say, yeah, my whole, my face was wincing because it was just so bitter. And so you have some kind of experience there with the lemon. And the point of it is, there was no lemon. That lemon was in your imagination, but yet you had a physiological response as if you had actually bit into a lemon. So, was that real? I think we're going to have to expand our definition of reality to, as I said, include invisible reality. Invisible reality are things that are real but you can't see. For example, out here in the Palm Springs area where I am, there are a lot of palm trees. And so as I'm looking out my window and I see the palm tree swaying in the breeze, if I would say to you, well, look at that palm tree moving. What's causing that? Do I have a remote control, or what's going on? And then you would say, well, the wind is blowing it. But I can't see the wind. But just because I can't see the wind, because the wind is invisible, doesn't mean that it's not real. A lot of times, the way we know invisible reality is in effect is because we see the byproducts, or we see the consequences of it. For example, when we're holding pictures in our mind, we may not be able to, I can't look at you and see what's in your head, but I can look at your environment. And just by what you have in your environment, I know what you've been thinking because your inner pictures literally are creating your reality. So it's vital to have, as I'm repeating this, it's vital to have the right pictures that would be the pictures that would move us to what we want. And if you don't have those pictures, then you've got to get a way to go into the subconscious mind, find the picture, take it out, and replace it. And that process is what we call transformational meditation. And you could technically call it picture replacement therapy. So we want to find the thoughts that are in your mind, and the thoughts are held as pictures. And of course, the importance of finding the thoughts or beliefs is that your thoughts create your emotions, and your emotions create your actions. So that whole sequence is literally creating your reality. Let's look at the transformational meditation model. You see there's the self and the word I and the superconscious mind here in the middle. And this is surrounded by the words love, truth, wisdom, power, compassion, peace, joy, freedom. Wayne Dyer, who's a pretty prominent author right now, Wayne Dyer says that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. So as a spiritual being having a human experience, then I'm going to say that this inner section here, this self, that's who you are. As a spiritual being, you have all the attributes of a spiritual being. But what you notice is, let me get a highlighter here. Yeah, there we go. What you notice is there are things out here in the perimeter that seem to be in conflict with who I say you are. Well, if you're love and truth, wisdom and power, then how do we reconcile, well, I'm afraid, I'm guilty, I'm angry, or, moving down here, I'm not worthy, I'm stupid, going down below, I can't make enough money, I can't do it, I can't stop eating chocolate, I'm too, and then some negative, I'm too fat, I'm too thin, I'm too short, I'm too old, up here about 9 o'clock, I don't deserve it. And then I'm not, and then some kind of positive attribute. I'm not smart enough. I'm not old enough. I'm not pretty enough. So how do we reconcile that we're saying that we are this spiritual being, but then we have these attitudes and behaviors and emotions that are absolutely in conflict? Well, that is the recipe of we're a spiritual being having the human experience. And so what we really want to do is being the human being, we want to have a spiritual experience. And these, what are I call little eyes out in the perimeter, are actually the human experience that is being negative. And so part of the reason is, well, not part of the reason, all of the reason is because we are holding beliefs that are not accurate about ourselves. So I want to talk about these parts, or what I call little eyes, and how they get created so that you can understand this model. So let's take the example of a little girl in kindergarten. And her mother is a single mother. Tomorrow is her school play. She wants her mom to come to the play, of course. So she says, Mommy, can you come to my play? And the mom says, I'm sorry, I have to work. So the little girl is disappointed, but she goes ahead and goes to school the next day. But when she's in the auditorium and it's almost time for her to come on stage, she thinks, as children are optimistic, maybe my mommy will be here after all. So she, parts the curtains and she looks out in the wings, and she makes an observation as she analyzes the crowd. She says, hey, all the other mommies are here but mine. My mommy doesn't love me. I'm no good. I must be a terrible child. If my mommy loved me, she'd be here. And she makes 3 or 4 observations that are actually incorrect. What, did she, take a roll call of all of the parents? How does she know that all the moms are there? That is very unlikely that all of the mothers are there but her mother. And
from there, from that wrong analysis, then she extrapolates, well, my mom is not here because I must be no good, or I'm not lovable, I'm a bad child, and several things. And what happens is now there is an aspect of herself that's believing something that's not true. The truth is, the mother is not there because she loves the daughter, so she's going to work to make money to pay for, the costume and the tuition for that particular school and everything else. But what happens is, because a truth and a lie cannot exist in the same place, in the same space at the same time, then they have to coexist. And so that's what happens in this model. So we've got the truth in here, and that's at the spiritual aspect. We know that we are lovable and we do know the truth, but then we've got this part out here, and so they're literally coexisting, except that they're in conflict. So at the deeper level, we know the truth is we're lovable, but a part of us thinks that we're not. So this is literally the recipe for inner conflict. And so when this part splits off, believing, I'm no good, my mother doesn't love me, what's interesting is it takes your name. So originally obviously we start off whole in here. And then when parts split off, they take your name with you and they start using the words I am. So that there's your name. So what we want to do at a minimum is I'm going to X out the I am and not let them use the word I am anymore. And we'll start calling them a part of me. A part of me feels afraid. A part of me feels angry. So we're not denying that we have the parts, but we're not letting them use our identity. It's been like an identity theft, and the little I could stand for imposter. Down here, if we go, a part of me feels not worthy. A part of me feels stupid. Down at 5 o'clock, a part of me thinks it can't make enough money. A part of me thinks it. See, now we're saying it. So at a minimum, we're linguistically distancing ourselves from this part. A part of me thinks it can't make enough money. Part of me thinks it can't do it. So our first step is to linguistically distance ourselves, but ultimately what we really want to do is we want to get these parts that have split off because they were not knowing the truth, and we want to get them back into the self. The self is the generic word that I use for that aspect of yourself that, let me give you a good example before I give you the name. One of the students that we had in the 28-day course last year was a medical doctor, and he worked in the emergency room. And he said one time a patient came in and they were working on her, and then she flatlined. She flatlined for a little while, and they resuscitated her, and she came back. And when she came back, she said, oh yes, I saw the nurse was taking a sponge out of the drawer, and the doctor was doing this and that. And everything she reported could not have been seen unless somebody had a vantage point that was up above looking down. So this big I, or the self, the inner self, the true self, the higher self, some people call the soul of the spirit, is that aspect of yourself that when it leaves your body, we call you dead. That in the examples that you hear, like the one that I just cited, that you'll read in like Raymond Moody's book of the near-death experiences, saying that people would report the same ER kind of experience. I was floating up above in the corner of the room, and I could see my body down below, and they were trying to resuscitate me, and I felt so free and so light, and I was floating, and then next thing I knew I was back in my body, and it was painful, and I was mad. And so this big I is that aspect, whatever word you want to use. Commonly people will say soul or spirit. So the point of this transformational meditation model is, if we have this part that says, I don't deserve it, that's actually not true. I mean, everybody deserves wealth and health, and so what we want to do is take this part and move it back into the truth of who you are, who is abundant and powerful. And so that's the function of transformational meditation. When we're doing transformational meditation, the technique or the methodology actually literally moves this part back into the truth through the meditation process. I can't take you through the transformational meditation process in this particular webinar because it's a custom one-on-one where the transformational coach literally guides you and facilitates the process. But what I can do is explain the process so you can see if it's something that you find interesting or that you resonate with. So in the process, the transformational coach guides the person to either this part comes back into the truth and says, yes, I do deserve it, or the other option is we get rid of it. So we can go two directions. Either this I don't deserve it is coming back into the self and saying, well, yes, the truth is I do deserve it. Or we're getting rid of it so that it's gone. So either way, it's gone. And so what I want to do right now is give you another visualization. Everybody's got little eyes here. This particular model is just a smattering of things that people have said before of their little eyes. And so what I want you to do right now is I'm going to draw, imagine that there's a little eye down here at 6 o'clock and there's space. And I want you to think of what's one of your limitations. What's one of your little eyes? I can't do this, I'm not this, I'm afraid this, whatever. I'm going to give you a moment to think about what one of your little eyes is. And then we're going to visualize it. Why don't you write it down? If you have a piece of paper there, go ahead and write it down. And then we'll visualize it. And what's interesting about these little eyes is imagine that the big eye or the inner self is like a diamond. And the little eyes are mud that are obscuring the diamond. And so what the good news is that we don't have to make you a diamond. You already are. What we have to do is wash off the mud of the little eyes so that you can be the brilliant diamond that you are. So let's go back to this little eye that you're creating here. And so just take a breath and let your eyes close. And put one hand out. Just lift up one hand and have the palm facing the ceiling. And imagine a picture that would symbolize the part of you that has this belief or this feeling. Just make it up in your imagination. We're going back into the imagination. How do you imagine it to look? What should it look like, this part of you that thinks or feels whatever? And then open your eyes and come back. And so what's interesting about that is you probably found a picture. And what that's telling you is that you already have that program of whatever it was your little eye is, and all you did was you literally went and found it and you held it in your hand. So you didn't create the program, it was already there. You just put a picture to it. And so in transformational meditation, the picture replacement therapy, what we do is in one hand we bring out the little eye, and in the other hand, we actually create a picture of whatever your higher power is, or we can use the big eye, or let me show you this 4 expressions of mind. You can imagine a picture of what your version of God, greater power, infinite intelligence, the universe, whatever you call your higher power, or the mind number 2, the superconscious mind, that's your big eye. I want to talk to you for a minute about these 4 expressions of mind, because the 4 expressions of mind are the usage of the various expressions of mind explain how we do transformational meditation, and the universal mind or superconscious mind is the element
or aspect we use in the exercise of transformational meditation. But let's talk about these four expressions of mind, especially because we have to reconcile with these beliefs that we have are wrong, or these inappropriate negative emotions. Why don't we just tell ourselves to stop having the emotion? Why don't I just do an affirmation and say, I have $1,000,000, I have $1,000,000. There's just one problem with that. What about the little I, this part of me that's saying, oh, who are you kidding? Yeah, right, like you really have it. So it's not effective to try and consciously reprogram your subconscious mind, and I'm going to give you the long version of that. So let's go back to the four expressions of mind and break them down one by one. The highest expression of mind is the non-physical mind, which my word for non-physical is spiritual. So spiritual actually just means that you can't see it, and it is in the realm of invisible reality. So the universal mind, also known as God, greater power, infinite intelligence, the universe, higher power, whatever your word for that is, the source of divine will, is experienced through the sixth sense. Meaning, if your word is God, you can't see God. It operates in invisible reality. Okay, so that's the first expression of mind, and we're going in the hierarchy of the pecking order. So at the top of the pecking order is the spiritual mind, known as God, or whatever your word for it is. And just think for a minute, what's the label that you use? And we're not talking about religion here. We're talking about like infinite intelligence, for example. That's the word that Napoleon Hill uses in his book Think and Grow Rich. So it doesn't have to be a religious thing. It could be if you're a religious person or not. Let's go to the next level of mind. That's the superconscious mind. That's the big I that I was just showing you a minute ago on the transformational meditation model, also known as the self, soul, spirit, energy, higher self, conscience. Some people just call it their conscience, that aspect of yourself that knows right from wrong. And it also is experienced through the sixth sense. You can't see it, meaning you can't go to the grocery store and put it in your shopping cart. And again, it operates in invisible reality. So those are the two spiritual minds. So we are a spiritual being. Now we've got to have our human experience. And the human experience is composed of your conscious mind and your subconscious mind. The conscious mind is very straightforward. It uses the five senses to perceive information. So here we had the sixth sense in the superconscious mind. We had the sixth sense in universal mind, but now all of a sudden we've got the five senses only. So now we've got a departure. And when I was teaching school, we used to tell the kids, you're only using 10% of your mind. Well, gee, the question to me should have been, well, where's the other 90%, and how do I access it? Who's teaching courses on the other 90% of your mind? Well, we are at the Academy of Self-Knowledge. The language of the conscious mind is words, and of course, you'll recognize your conscious mind because it's the aspect of yourself that's logical, rational, intellectual. It intellectualizes, and things have to make sense. Okay? Also, it's the seat of your free will. Even though it's 10% of your mind, your conscious choice or your ability to make decisions is huge. So your conscious mind is the one that decides, well, I think I'll go to Baskin Robbins and get an ice cream. No, I'll go to the grocery store and pick up some fruit. So that's what we call the gatekeeper or the captain of the ship. You're responsible for making choices. So no wonder you have to be able to analyze, because how could you make choices if you have no power of analysis? The conscious mind operates in visible reality, meaning you use your physical eyes for vision and physical ears for hearing. So remember when we were doing the lemon exercise, we weren't using the physical eyes. We were using your mind's eye, or what we call the third eye. For example, if we'd all been in the same room doing that lemon exercise, and I were standing in the front of the room, would I have seen any lemons? No, I would have seen
classroom full of people with their eyes closed. So to the conscious mind, the imagination makes no sense. It'll think, oh, you're making all of that up. Well, yes, we are making it up, the pictures up, but the pictures, as we saw from the limit exercise, are actually going to dictate and impact our reality. But the conscious mind doesn't necessarily understand that, and that's all right. Another one of the jobs of the conscious mind is that it programs the non-conscious mind, but it cannot consciously reprogram it. And I was talking about that earlier. I'm going to come back to this and what a huge problem it is that the conscious mind can't reprogram the non-conscious mind. In other words, all of the alcoholics in the world can't just tell themselves to stop drinking and then they'll stop. So, and I'll explain why that is. Let's get on to the non-conscious mind. So this is the fourth aspect, the fourth expression of mind. And once again, we're back to the sixth sense. So the non-conscious mind perceives information through the sixth sense, and there's your 90% of the mind. Your subconscious or unconscious mind. So some people call it the non-conscious, some people call it subconscious. In fact, most people call it subconscious or unconscious. So I'll just probably say subconscious from here on out. And the language of the subconscious mind is symbol and picture. So when we were in your subconscious mind, seeing the lemon there, that was the language, that you saw. Now, the interesting thing about your subconscious mind is it has no logic. It does not reason or analyze, and things do not have to make sense. So we could kind of say, uh-oh, that looks kind of to be a problem. 90% of my mind is not using logic. All right, that's the bad news. I should say the seeming bad news. However, when your subconscious mind is in its natural state, it is a clear conduit and reflector of truth. It reflects the unboundedness of the superconscious mind and infinite intelligence. So what I mean by that is, let's go back to the diagram of the four expressions of mind. So, and remember, we had the sixth sense in the superconscious mind and universal mind. We saw the sixth sense again in the subconscious mind. Of course, we had the conscious mind was only using the six senses. I'm sorry, the five senses. So as you look at this diagram of the four expressions of mind, all right, so, things don't have to make sense in the subconscious mind, and it may not have any logic, but look, we're going to do a little connect the dots. It's got friends in high places. So you see this kind of a spiritual snorkel or the spiritual umbilical cord that it may not have any logic, but it literally is capable of receiving the information from the higher minds. And that's why it's so important. That's the good news. Okay, but let's get to the bad news again. But it's also subject to and takes orders from the limited conscious mind. That 10%, the captain. So we call the conscious mind is the captain of the ship in our ship metaphor, and the subconscious mind is the crew. And the crew carries out orders from the captain unquestioned. So if it has received faulty orders or faulty programming, then it's going to experience separation. That's the little eye. Remember when the little eye split off? And it's going to reflect limitation. That's the problem. And I'll speak again in a minute about, well, all right, so what are we going to do about that? I'm not going to talk about a problem without the solution. But before we get into the solution, let's talk a little bit more about the functions of the subconscious mind, continuing with that. So it's what we call the alpha level of consciousness. For those of you who have taken the Silva method, you would recognize that. But alpha level simply means when you're in a relaxed state, when you're in your subconscious mind, that your brain waves are moving a little bit more slowly. An example of somebody in the alpha where you see a kid who's watching television and they're their jaws kind of gaping open, and you could wave your hand in front of their eyes and they wouldn't blink because they're just kind of, entranced by the television. So the alpha level just simply means we're relaxed. The subconscious mind also uses the mind's eye for internal vision. That's where you saw the lemon, in your mind's eye. And the mind's ear for inner hearing. You know how people will make reference to their little voice? Oh, I should have listened to my little voice, and they didn't. That's the mind's ear. And I'll give you an example of that. Probably about 20 years ago, I was living in El Paso with my then husband, who played professional basketball in the NBA for 5 years. And he was coaching at that time at UTEP, which is Texas El Paso. And I'd gone to a basketball game that night, and I was driving home by myself. We always took separate cars because, they've got to talk to the players afterwards. And we lived out in the country, and I came to a four-way stop. And I stopped. I looked both ways, and I was just about ready to go, and I heard this voice very loudly in my mind that said, "Look again." And it was so compelling that I literally kept my foot on the brake, and I looked again to the left, and this car came out of seemingly nowhere, blew through the four-way stop, and would have broadsided me, would have T-boned me, going about 60 miles an hour. So, if you had been sitting in my passenger seat, and I look at you and I say, "Did you hear that?" And then you would say, "Hear what?" Because that voice was in my head, in my inner reality. So that's all a function of the subconscious mind. It's coming from the higher minds, coming right into my subconscious mind, and then popping up, where I say, "Gee, I better look again." So remember that the subconscious mind does not function through the five senses to gain information, obviously. And when I use a word like the sixth sense, I don't mean woo-woo weird, like in that movie The Sixth Sense when the kid said, "I see dead people." And granted, people have reported saying, Grandpa appeared in a beam of light at the bottom of my bed. So if we do see dead people, we definitely see them with our sixth sense. But the sixth sense isn't limited to those kind of things. The sixth sense simply means if I take in information, not through my five senses, anything other than the sixth sense, like when I heard that voice in my head and said, "Look again." That's the sixth sense. Let's talk about some more functions of the non-conscious mind or the subconscious mind. It is the seat of emotion. That's why, remember that the subconscious mind can be irrational, and emotions are irrational. That's why we call them emotions. They're not logic. Another function of the non-conscious mind is that it stores data. So if I said to you, "All right, wherever you live, what is your zip code?" And, think that to yourself, or say it out loud. If you were here, I'd have you say it out loud. Okay, and so my question for you is, well, where was that information 30 seconds ago? And where it was, people say it was in the back of my head. Well, there's no such thing as the back of your the back of your head. So where it was in your non-conscious mind. That's where it gets stored. It's like a computer, when you're sitting at the keyboard and you bring up a file and then you put the file away. Where does that file go? Well, it goes into the and back into the storage. So that's what we can use a good analogy, the computer analogy for your subconscious mind. All right, so it stores data. It holds memories. If I said to you, "What did you have for breakfast this morning?" And just think about it. Maybe you had nothing, in which case, what did you have for dinner last night? How about that? And imagine it. And what's interesting about that is the way you're able to answer that question, and I say, "What did you have for dinner last night?" If we put that whole process into slow motion, it would be like your captain of the ship is hollering down to the crew, "What did I have for dinner last night?" And then the crew flashes up
a flashcard that has a piece of it shows a plate with some salmon and some spinach, and then you say, I had salmon and spinach last night, Libby. But because that happens so quickly, you don't actually realize that everything in your subconscious mind is stored in pictures, and that literally you're just pulling a picture out and looking at it. Which brings us again back to what I had said earlier, that it's important to have the right pictures of creation of what you want to create. And if they're not right, we've got to get into the subconscious mind, take them out, and replace them. So much for holds the memories. Imagination. Okay, now imagination, creativity, and intuition is the exact reason why we can't have the subconscious mind limited to things that make sense. Because technically, when we did that lemon exercise, it doesn't make sense to your conscious mind that you can see an imaginary lemon and then have your face scrunch up, or the conscious mind, who's logical and rational, would have said to Walt Disney, well, mice can't talk, when he was visualizing Mickey Mouse, or whatever, it was a rat when he first started, and he had talking mice. Well, if we only allowed ourselves to function on the basis of, oops, there went my cell phone. If we only allowed ourselves to function on the basis of what makes sense, that would knock out our entire imaginary function. So the biggest reason that we can't have the subconscious mind making sense is because the creative process and even the intuition, it doesn't make sense that I would hear a voice in my head, telling me that I better look again. The whole thing doesn't make sense to the conscious mind. So this is the deal that we have to strike with the conscious mind. It's like, okay, that might not make sense to you, but we still have to trust it, because what does make sense is when I follow it, I get good results. So we can kind of enlist the support of the conscious mind simply because what does make sense is when I heard that voice said, look again, I kept my foot on the brake and I wasn't T-boned. So even though the conscious mind doesn't understand it, it can still accept it. All right, let's go on to the next function. Runs the body and autonomic functions. The highest prime directive of the subconscious mind is survival. So, you don't have to think about blinking right now. You don't say, gee, should I wait till Libby's done with the next slide, or should I blink now? So that just happens automatically. Never sleeps, because you would die. You would stop breathing, and say, oh, Joe, I told him not to go to sleep. Now he went to sleep and his heart stopped beating. So it never sleeps. That's why in operating rooms now, they don't let the surgeons say negative things about the patients, like, oh, this one's not going to make it, because now people understand, we have the understanding that the subconscious mind is recording everything that's going on like a little mini camera. Receives and runs the programs of the conscious mind, unquestioned, even though the conscious mind forgets that it provided the programming. Going back to our little girl, in kindergarten, she's not going to remember 30 years later when she feels unloved by her husband and says, oh, my husband doesn't love me. She's not going to remember that was connected to the decision that she made. She's probably not even going to remember that situation when her mom wasn't at the play and she said to herself, I'm unlovable. It just, once the crew gets that order, they just continue to carry it out until somebody comes back and changes the order. And that's what transformational meditation is, getting new marching orders that are effective. Okay, and the final function of the non-conscious or subconscious mind is that it stores the little I's. So one of the things that I want to say about storing the little I's is that that's just, as you can see, it's just a small function compared to, look at this non-conscious mind here. Half of the slide is taken up with functions of the subconscious mind, and storing the little I's is just one of them. So sometimes the subconscious mind gets a bad rap
because of the fact that it does store the little i's. In fact, if I were to give you a pie chart of the little i's, I'm sorry, of the subconscious mind, you could say maybe 8% is emotions, 40% of the subconscious function is running the body, and 40% is the data and storing the data in the memories. 10% is maybe the creativity and intuition and all that. And 2% is little I storage. So I just want to point out that storing the little I's is the small aspect of what the subconscious mind does. However, having said that, it may be a small percentage, but if you had a cup of tea and somebody put 2 drops of, strong poison in it, well, it may be only 2 drops, but it would be lethal. So the thing about the little I's is, yeah, it may only be, a small percentage, but but it can really throw us off course. So I told you that I would get back to this idea of, well, why can't the conscious mind just reprogram the subconscious mind? When I'd said that going up here to the conscious mind, where we said, well, it programs the non-conscious mind, but it can't consciously reprogram. Well, why is that? Well, because they don't speak the same language. That's why. The language of the conscious mind is words, blah, 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 blah. And it's also logic, and it analyzes. Whereas the language of the subconscious mind is symbol. So words and symbol are 2 different things. Plus, the subconscious mind has no logic. So how can you use logic on somebody who doesn't have any logic? I mean, you just know that from teenagers, for example. So you say to a teenager, you really shouldn't smoke because the studies show that you can get cancer. And in one wave of the arm, they dismiss it and go, well, I don't care about all that. That won't happen to me. So you literally cannot use logic when somebody doesn't have any logic. All right. So Einstein said that you can't solve the problem with the same level of mind that created the problem. So in our example of the little girl, I said that it was the little girl's conscious mind that decided, yes, I'm looking out into the audience and my mother's not here and et cetera, she doesn't love me. So if the conscious mind created the problem, it can't be the one to have the solution. But the good news is we have 2 other minds higher. We've got universal mind and we've got the superconscious mind that we could use for problem resolution. So what we're going to do in transformational meditation is that we use universal mind to work with and change the pictures of the little I's and clear out the little I's. Those little I's which were the little mud balls that are being thrown on the diamond. So that's the 4 expressions of mind. Now these 4 expressions of mind give rise to the use of the word I 3 different times. And I'll show you what I mean by that. Let's go to the next slide. Who are you? The words I or you can have 3 different meanings depending on upon which mind is expressing itself. On the previous slide, 4 expressions of mind are explained. These 4 expressions of mind can give rise to the 3 distinct definitions of the word I or you. So let's look at the first use of the word I. So the word I here is the self or the superconscious mind that we were talking about earlier. I'll just read this slide. I or the self is synonymous with the superconscious mind or conscience. The self is in alignment with the truth, and from this place of being, you express love, truth, freedom, power, compassion, humility, and all the other positive characteristics of the big I or your conscience. When referring to the self, we will use the words I and you, written entirely in capital letters, italicized, in bold print. We will use the term the big I. Okay? So that's the big I, and I like to call the big I the high road. Now what's the opposite of the high road? Well, it's the low road. That would be obviously the opposite, which is the little I. And remember, the little I lives in the non-conscious or the subconscious mind. So the little I or the separated self is a fragmented part that gets created when the conscious mind makes choices that are out of alignment with truth. We could say choices or decisions. Oh, all the other moms are here. My mom doesn't love me. There are many separated parts, and they are all contained in the subconscious mind. Remember that the subconscious mind has many other functions in addition to storing the separated parts. Remember when I gave you the pie chart? The non-conscious mind also is an instrument of the unboundedness of the superconscious mind and infinite intelligence. When referring to the separated self, we will use the words little I or little u in quotes and lowercase letters. So that this is just a recap. So we got the big I, we got the little I, the high road and the low road. And then what's right in the middle? What's in between? Well, the conscious mind. The conscious mind, I or the conscious mind, is the logical, rational aspect of your physical mind that is focused on gathering data, analysis, and making choices. It perceives information strictly through the five senses. This is the human aspect or physical mind that has free will. You see, we're recapping all of this. As a result of having free will, you, through your conscious mind, have the opportunity to use your free will to choose. When choices are made that are in alignment with truth, wholeness continues and is experienced. So in our kindergarten example, if the little girl had said, oh yes, that's right, my mom's not here because she's got to go to work, and of course she's working because she loves me, then there never would have been the separation. But when we make a decision that's out of alignment, well, then we do. And when you make a choice that is out of alignment with truth, a separated self is instantly created, which experiences a separated reality. When referring to the you of the conscious mind, we will use the customary words I and you in their usual form. So let me put them all together here. Who are you? We've got the high road here of the self, the big I. We got the low road of the little I, and we've got the chooser right here in the middle. What's funny about this diagram is you can imagine those cartoons that you've seen before in the past where you've got a person's head, and then you got the devil on the one shoulder and the angel on the other shoulder. So maybe the person's watching their weight, and then there's a piece of cake, and the little I goes, go ahead, have a bite, you want it. And the big I's going, now, come on, we made an agreement that we're going to lose weight and eat healthy. And so there's the battle between the high road and the low road. So what we want to have happen here is obviously we want to go on the high road because the high road's going to take us where we want to go. So this is the team. The team is the chooser using the free will to make choices that are going to take us where we want to go. So this is the spiritual being having the human experience and the converse, the human being having the spiritual experience. And so what we don't want is this little I's. We want to X that out, and we want to remove the little I's, and that's what we use the process of transformational meditation to do that. As I was saying earlier, we can't do the actual process of doing a picture replacement therapy with the little I that you saw, but I can show you the components. And remember, I said the components would be in one hand you've got the little I, and in the other hand you could have the big I, or you could have God or infinite intelligence. And then the transformational coach kind of facilitates a conversation between the two until the hands come together in alignment, or else you get rid of the part. But I can show you the second ingredient or element of transformational meditation, and that is we do visualize the big I or God or whatever it is. And I want to take you into the third and final meditation where you're literally going to visualize either God or infinite intelligence, your conscience, your big I, your higher self, any one of whatever the highest level of mind is that you believe in. And this is your spiritual framework. This is what I call the gospel according to you. Whatever your spiritual framework is, we want to respect that. So what we're going to do is, in a minute, I'll have you close your eyes, and I'll actually have facilitate a conversation between your captain and your higher power. And we'll just have a little, that's pretty easy for me to facilitate, when we're all in a group. So if you would, just take a breath and let your eyes close.
and just focus on slowing down the rhythm of your breath, extending the inhalation and prolonging the exhalation so that your body can relax and you can move yourself to the alpha level of consciousness, to the subconscious mind, through a physical domino effect where the respiration slows down, causing the heart rate to slow down, causing the brain waves then to slow down to the alpha level of consciousness, where you can access your subconscious thoughts, emotions, programming from the past, where you can activate your imagination. And this alpha level of consciousness, or the subconscious mind, literally is your spiritual umbilical cord connecting you to infinite intelligence. And as you continue slowing down the rhythm of your breath, if you would just watch yourself breathe for a moment. Observe. And then I'm going to ask you if 20 minutes ago, were you watching yourself breathe? And you can answer. You probably said no. And I'd say, why not? You were breathing, weren't you? Why weren't you watching? Did you even notice that you were breathing? Probably not. And the reason is because you weren't focused on it. You were focused on probably something that I was saying. And so the subconscious mind simply contained that information outside of your conscious awareness. I'll give you another example. Let your conscious awareness now travel down to your right thumb and become aware of your thumb. 3 hours ago, were you aware of your right thumb? Probably not. Why not? Well, because you weren't focused on it. So the subconscious mind, once again, was retaining that information outside of your conscious awareness to leave your conscious mind free to think about whatever it was you were focused on. So it's not that the subconscious mind is hiding information from us, it's simply storing it. And if we want to know something, if we want to get to that information, like what's your zip code, or what's your area code, or what color is your bedspread, or what did you have for dinner last night, all we have to do is focus on it. And the easiest way to focus is actually to make up a picture. We're going to do that right now and focus and concentrate your thoughts. So just gently turn your two hands over so your palms are up. And in one hand, imagine a picture that would symbolize the captain of your ship, the conscious mind, you. Make yourself up to look however you'd like in the one hand. And in the other hand, imagine a picture that would symbolize your greater power, whatever that is for you. How would you imagine that to look? And if it doesn't come easily, just assign it a picture. Well, it should look like this. And then have the captain, the conscious mind, become aware of the greater power in the other hand. The same way you became aware of your right thumb, just like, hey, look over there. Have the captain become aware of the higher power, the greater power. And then have the captain listen as I ask the greater power, what message does it have for the captain today? What message does your greater power have for you today? And listen. Take a breath and listen. And the next question, we're going to imagine that your greater power has brought a gift for you today. Imagine, what gift does your greater power have for you today? As you're listening and you're watching for that gift, let your two hands come together with that gesture symbolizing, I accept the gift. Let the two hands come together as the captain and the greater power become one, become the team. And watch what happens visually and feel what happens. And when that feels complete, go ahead and take whatever image or energy is on your two hands, take it back inside. Whether you put that image or feeling back in your heart or your head, your solar plexus, just take it back inside. You can't walk around with it on, with this picture on your hands all day. Take that back inside and then at your own pace, open your eyes and come back. Just notice that as you open your eyes, you're kind of still in your alpha level, meaning you're relaxed. That's fine. So we took a trip and never left the farm. And notice whether it was easy for you to use your imagination or not. Some people need practice tuning into the imagination because it's like a muscle. Some people exercise their muscles and they're bigger, and other people haven't. So you have to exercise the muscle of the imagination, and the way you do that is just by continuing to visualize like that. And so what we did there was we actually activated your imagination. And so now that you've activated your imagination, we want you to proactively utilize it for problem resolution. So what we want you to do is be able to go into the subconscious mind, find the pictures that need to be replaced, use that greater power to replace them, and upgrade your programming, I guess you could say. So I wish that we could do that together and that I could get some feedback of what your experience was in this session, in the webinar. So what we've done is provided you the opportunity to meet with a transformational coach so you can ask questions about this experience. So you can share your experience and say, when I saw the lemon, that was easy for me, and this is what happened, or I couldn't see the lemon. Whatever it is that you want to discuss or ask questions about, just go ahead and either email us at info@academyofselfknowledge or call the office phone number, which is here, you can see it, and just reserve a time to speak with somebody about it so that you can get your questions answered. And I want you to kind of think to yourself and notice whether you had resonance with whether the things that I was saying in the webinar made sense or not, and whether you resonate with this idea of, well, yes, maybe I do want to learn how to activate my imagination, and I want to learn how to do the picture replacement therapy, etc., etc. You can see a few success stories, and you can read these at your leisure. I think I will point out the first one where it says, this is the most painless and effective way I have discovered to dump old baggage and to move forward with the things I want in my life. It's not hard or painful to do the exercise. We just go in, find the picture, and replace it. And what's interesting about this meditation technique is it's not like mainstream hypnosis. It's a meditation technique where who's doing the programming? The greater power is doing the programming. The coach isn't telling you, what your programming should be. That's between you and your conscience or your greater power or, whatever you're choosing for an image there. So I hope that you've gotten benefit
from this, and we look forward to your calling the office, making your appointment, getting your questions answered, and thank you for your participation and attendance.